It is devastating to watch people go through this. It's scary, but it's also frustrating to see the reactions.
You're implying that the government made a hurricane stronger to hurt its own country, the United States of America? And what would be the gain of that?
If like, there's been people out there, if they have an Alexa, I don't know if you've heard that, and they've asked what caused Milton.
Okay.
You can go on there now. It's already predicted the number of deaths and the amount of, it's already predicted it. On a Google, it won't do that. If you ask it about Helene, it'll tell you the government actively used seed clouding. This is before Helene even happened.
Why would a country want to have a hurricane be strong and hit its own country?
Because they want to control certain places. And if you're looking at where the hurricane's going, it's a lot of red states.
Warming, that's the global warming you have to worry about. Not that the ocean's going to rise in 400 years an eighth of an inch, and you'll have more seafront property, right, if that happens. I said, is that good or bad? I said, isn't that a good thing? If I have a little property on the ocean, I have a little bit more property. I have a little bit more ocean.
And building of policies that will help the people of the U.S. who is going through climate change consequences. We have a chance, as a people that are part of democratic societies, to vote in people who will do something about climate change, who vote in people who are not going to believe in these crazy schemes or conspiracy theory, who want to criticize government policies to make them better, to help the people later, not just to get into power, not just to take down a government, but to say, let's work together on this and let's help the American people. I have more respect for somebody who's not in power as part of a party that says, let's work together to make relief efforts better after these disasters, because we're going to see more of them, than somebody to come up with some crazy conspiracy theory and pass it out and make sure that misinformation is out there to like say, hey, you know what? Who cares? I want to be in power. You suck. You're cloud seeding. You're making the Republicans not vote because of this storm. You're controlling the weather. You're controlling the weather. This is like a scene out of like a Mike Myers movie. It's like Dr. Evil. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast, the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about Hurricane Milton. We're also going to be talking about Hurricane Helene. These are both hurricanes that have passed through over the past couple of weeks through the southern Florida, middle Florida, I guess Gulf states like the western coast of Florida, and have produced a lot of damage, right? And with Milton, as it just passed by last night as of recording this, we were very fortunate that there wasn't the damage that happened, that we first initially thought. Initially, like a couple days ago, even a day ago, it went from a Category 3 to a Category 5 quite rapidly. And then before it hit the Tampa region, which was bracing and evacuating, it went down to a Category 3. It passed over the entire state of Florida and then went to the other side. By the time it reached the other side, it was a Category 1. So there was some flooding in areas, but the damage wasn't as bad as it was predicted to be, which is a great thing. We got away with a lot. Let's be honest. You know, as a community, as a continent, you know, the U.S., the state of Florida, they got away with a lot. And although unfortunately people did pass away, the last time I heard it was about 9 that they're saying passed away. The damage and the amount of lives that were lost was minimized by the evacuation, by the lessened storm. But Hurricane 3, I've been through a hurricane that was a Category 3. That is scary. It is extremely scary to live through. I remember I went through Hurricane Juan in Halifax when I was living there with my now wife. We were okay because there weren't a lot of big trees where it was, but you know, in downtown Halifax where there were like older trees, you know, large trees, the pavement was just jackknifed because the trees and the roots had come up. The wind was so high that the city shut down for like 3 weeks, and that was devastating to the people in the city, to the city itself, and it was a standstill. with Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton coming through, there was a lot of damage just because it was two hurricanes, one a hurricane category 4 and the other one a category 3 in Milton. So the worry was that Helene was so devastating that, the category 3, if it was a category 5 especially, it would just compound the problems that was already there. However, it didn't seem to do that. Although there was a lot of damage, there were tornadoes in Hurricane Milton, a lot of tornadoes that caused a lot of damage as well. The wind caused more damage than what was expected as the flooding to cause, which was better than normal, I guess. It's still a lot of damage. It's still going to cost a lot. It's still, life-changing for a lot of people that had to go through it, that live there, that may not have insurance or is uninsurable. People who lost their homes that live in trailer parks because of the tornadoes and the winds. Other places that are vulnerable as well to high winds. Lost a lot, lost their livelihoods, like in terms of their homes and everything. And I don't know how they're going to get over that. It's going to be a very difficult thing. There are a lot of GoFundMe's. There are a lot of ways that you can donate. One place I heard say people be careful in where you donate. If you can go through reputable organizations, that might be better, but just be careful because there are people who will commit fraud, so you just be careful with that. I want to go just to kind of cover that part because, when we cover episodes like this and we cover these hurricanes, I'm going to go into some stuff that I didn't like about some of the politics and what was said around these and I got some clips that I'm going to show you today around, the statements that are around these hurricanes. And this is where I have the problem. But I want to cover this part where, talking about some of the damage, talking about the problems that are faced and that people that are living through it, the people who couldn't evacuate, or even the people who evacuate. Like, we're looking at 9 to 10 million people trying to evacuate the area. I want to cover that first because I want to let people know, it is devastating. It is sad and it's scary and it's frustrating to see people go through this, to see people who have nowhere to go and can't evacuate and have to live through hurricanes that are very scary. Though some people, say, hey, I've lived through hurricanes for a long time, lived in Florida for 45 years or more. We've been through this before. It's going to be okay. It's still a scary prospect to live through and not know what's going to happen, what kind of damage is going to happen, flooding or anything like that. As was reported, Tampa is not built for flooding, which is very surprising. Being in Florida, where there are quite a number of hurricanes, it's not built for that great of flooding. But regardless, it's something that we have to make sure that we cover, and we got to make sure that we talk about some of the reasoning of why people are so vulnerable, why we're all vulnerable to hurricanes like this, how hurricanes are causing this, and the politics around climate change, the politics around it rapidly intensified and more numerous hurricanes that we're seeing. And this is the frustrating aspect of watching people go through this because they don't have a choice. We're seeing people on, like, they're taking videos. We're seeing people. Some people are like, no, like, our house was built to withstand a hurricane, and we're gonna be fine, and we're not leaving because this is a conspiracy. And I'll get into that in a second, but we're gonna be fine because what? Like, we're American. We can handle this, and it's not. And look, I get wanting to stay. I'm not a guy who likes change, but these are scary times. Especially these hurricanes that are rapidly intensifying, that are coming in later or even sooner than, normally. Originally, this was predicted to be the most devastating hurricane in 100 years that Tampa has ever faced, Tampa Bay. So these are the problems that we have to face, but then the politics around it is the frustrating part. Not even just the stuff that is not done to prevent these hurricanes from happening in the future. The problems are the stuff that's said after. Because it's a lot of, there's an election, obviously, in the U.S. coming up in November, a very important presidential election, a very important election for some governors, some senators, for Congress, people who are running for Congress. I don't know exactly how it's all delved out, if who gets voted up. I think even some governors are having some races. So there's some very important elections coming up. And I wanted to do this episode, and I wanted to highlight some of the things that are being said, all in the name of politics, all in the name of these elections. And some of them are way, way out there, and some of them are okay. Like, I get what needs to be done. And you would think that after storms like these that we faced and that we watched and witnessed, and some people went through, and you know, literally life changing, there's critique to be done, to be said. There are, you know, reports to be written. There's things that need to be reviewed and need to say, hey, did we do a good job in the relief efforts? Did we do a good job in the rescue efforts? What's happening with evacuation? How did evacuation go this time? How can we improve it for the next time? And just sort of adapt to the new changing normal that we are seeing with these storms. That is normal. That is what I expect to see. Maybe some criticism from the other side, like the people who are not in charge of government, like the parties that are not, like, so in this case, the Republicans are going to critique the Democrats, and even some Democrats are going to be like, we could have done better, maybe. You know, that's something. The big thing is, right after a storm, is to get the relief efforts, to get the rescue efforts in as soon as possible. And, you know, when Hurricane Helene went through and it devastated so many states, it touched so many states, not just Florida, but Georgia, I believe it was like Tennessee and the Carolinas. There may have been another state in there that I missed, but those places were like Asheville, North Carolina was devastated with flooding, and not a lot of rescue efforts. It spans so many states and so much area that relief efforts had to go through. And so there was criticism by, you know, the right, so the Republicans, on how fast things were, the amount of money that people received right away, whether the president and or the vice president who's running for president were in contact with the governors. There was a lot of stuff said and a lot of misinformation that was delved out by potentially both sides. And this is where the politics frustrates me. You know, it's like, you know, former President Trump, who's running for president again, is out there talking about how, you know, the current president Biden didn't talk to people in Florida, didn't talk, like, a lot of stuff was said that didn't actually happen. A lot of the governors had to come out and say, hey, you know what? We actually heard from President Biden. He actually gave us all the updates. He said, if we need anything, let them know. They're here for them. But the thing is, that's all said and good. Like, you want the president to call the people, make sure that all the resources get there. What was not really said a lot, it was said a little bit, but there are like rules and regulations that are put into place. There are actions that are put into place as soon as a disaster hits. There's a reason why there's an entire department, FEMA, that are there for these natural disasters, for the cleanup, for the immediate rescue, to manage all of that. And all of those tasks and rules and regulations are done by the department, and a lot of the times they're set out by like the lawmakers. So Congress and the senators. You know, these are bills that are put into place to ensure that these regulations are ready and the tasks are ready to be delved out in time for that when a natural disaster hits, relief efforts are right there. So the amount of money that people receive and the amount of effort and the amount of resources that are put towards this rescue and this relief are there as soon as it happens. You know, the president just has to say, put them to place, or it doesn't even have to be the president. The president calling the governors to make sure that everything's fine is probably normal practice. That's just good ethics. But all the other tasks are just like, that's done right away. And even probably before the president could say, let's do it, it's probably already in place. And when you have people on the other side who are like, well, it's not enough, we shouldn't do this, we should do that. That's when you're like, that's great to be like, hey, look, we tried this, it didn't work, or maybe the money didn't get there enough, or maybe like there was a $750 that was given to everybody who was like right away, so they can buy groceries, they can do whatever if they can do that. I don't know what it's for, but that's essentially what it's for. That is already done. But if they talk about like, well, that's not enough money, well, that's what's agreed upon in Congress, agreed upon by the lawmakers that put this stuff into place. If they have a problem with it, bring it up in government next time before these storms hit, not after. Like, you can say this critique is not enough. Like, you can say it's not enough. I get that. But then go back and say, hey, you know what? Like, we have to understand that storms are changing. They're getting more intensified. You know, climate change is real. You don't even have to admit that. Just be like, hey, 750 doesn't sound like enough money. Can we up it? And how is that going to affect the budget? How is that going to affect the amount of money that's given to the people who need rescue efforts? And especially if it goes across a number of states, especially if it hits millions and millions of people, what is that number? That's not even up to me to decide. That's up for the lawmakers and the departments and everything to provide the information so that the decisions can be made. But then you have all these critiques, and then all the one side's trying to do is trying to, make the other side look bad. The side that's in government is just to make them look bad. That's all they're trying to do because they want to get into power in this upcoming election. And this is not to say that Republicans are doing this and it's just the Republicans. If everything was switched, if the Republicans were, say, President Trump was actually president this time, and Biden's trying to get in, or Kamala Harris is trying to get in, and she's criticizing the same thing, it'd probably happen the same way. This is not a matter of Republicans against Democrats or one doing better than the other. This is a matter of not politicking when it comes to natural disasters. Try to hey, what can I do? How can I help? You know what I mean? Let's look at some camaraderie for Americans, some camaraderie for the people of the country. This is not just to Americans. This is if Canada had a natural disaster, how can we help? There will be time for criticizing the laws and the way it was done after. Where's that camaraderie? Where is that patriotism that people always talk about, right? To help the citizens. Both sides should be coming together to doing what they can. And there was that with President Biden and some of the governors that were Republican governors. And they came out and they said good things. They said, hey, he actually said whatever we need. There's that ability. We can have all of that. But there needs to be more of that, because what I saw and what I heard and what made headlines were some people that are in Congress, I'm not going to name their name, but who said that, and put it out there, which is total BS and misinformation at its finest. It was basically the government, the government in power, Biden and his administration, is cloud seeding the storms to make them rapidly intensify so that the storm goes over Republican-dominated states and affects the voting for the future. I wouldn't be surprised if the Republicans lose the race, that is an excuse that is given. So imagine this, that the president itself and the administration would take the powers that be and the public servants and everything and cloud seed the storms to make them intensify more. It's not climate change. It's the government controlling the storms to make sure that Republican-dominated states are in disarray so when the election comes, they cannot vote. Imagine thinking that. It's not climate change that people have been talking about for the last 50, 60 years. It's the fact that the government doesn't want the election to go to the Republicans, so they're going to affect Republican states. And that was perpetuated over a number of news stations, over TikTok, over social media. And here's a clip just of somebody who is believing this stuff. This is not just me saying this. These are people who are saying this. It's the government controlling hurricanes. Here's that clip. This is absolutely insane for someone to think that. Not the fact that science and scientists around the world are saying climate change is bad, and the reason for the rapidly intensifying storms is because the ocean is so warm due to the climate warming. Right? That's the reason. It's said by so many people. And it got to the point that meteorologists who are out there working their butts off to make sure that people have the information that they need, because the storm is rapidly intensifying, we don't know when the evacuation orders are going to come. Hurricane Helene went from a Category 1 to a Category 4 in 4 or 5 hours. And so the big damage there was that people did not know enough to evacuate. Because a Category 1, Florida people will probably stay because they've lived through a Category 1 before. Category 4, those are pretty intensified winds. Are you looking at 100-mile-an-hour winds to 165-mile-an-hour winds? That's a big difference. That could cause a lot of damage, plus the flooding. Right? So these meteorologists are working their butts off. Some of them are even getting emotional on TV, right? And because they can't fathom the fact that these storms are going to hurt people. These storms are going to affect people. Meteorologists are there to help people prepare for the weather. And yes, they're not always right. The predictions, models, and stuff change. But they're out there online, doing what they can to give people proper information. And how do people respond? Some people are offering them sending them death threats. Some people are giving them crap and harassing them and bullying them online. The fact that they're just trying to help people and inform people of the weather that is coming and what the preparation is and what to expect, they're saying, no, you're lying. You're just somebody for the government trying to get us and affect the way we're going to vote in the election. This is insane. And it doesn't help that people all the way at the top, like the Republican candidate, former President Trump, believes that sometimes having ocean property is good. So the fact that there's sea level rise says that, hey, more people are going to have ocean property. Right? So anybody who's on a coastline and the ocean and the sea level rises and the storm surge come up further and the ocean comes up further means a loss of land. Well, that's okay. You'll have more oceanfront property for everybody. That'll be good for real estate, which is false. It's actually bad. It's so bad. People will lose their property. They will lose their homes. And here he is, a guy who's going to be president, potentially, is ready to make those decisions and say, hey, you know what? Climate change isn't that bad. Even if it is, if there's sea level rise, it's okay. People have more oceanfront property. Who's going to have more oceanfront property? Who's going to be able to afford to live there? And who's going to be able to afford to realize that they can't live there and they can't sell their property when sea level rise does hit and ocean storm surges hit and they lose their homes? Only the rich are going to be able to, like, you know what? It's okay. I can afford it. I have 4 other homes. But the people who don't, the people in trailer parks, the people who have homes along the ocean or along a river that can only afford one home and are only there for one home, like most of us, if you can't sell your house, you can't buy another home somewhere else. Right? That's the equity you have in that home. If that home is gone and nobody will buy it because it's in water most of the year or one part of the year, the dam's there, no insurance, you have to pay for it every year, where are they going to go? They can't go anywhere. But Donald Trump's rich friends can go somewhere. And I'm not favoring Republican over Democrat. But this is a guy who's running for president who's having who says, hey, you know what? Sea level rise is here. Everybody's going to have more oceanfront property. It doesn't make sense. And it's just perpetuating these false narratives that, hey, climate change is okay. There's nothing we can do about it. We're not going to do anything about it. The governor of Florida has authorized the removal of the phrase climate change in all of their documents, all of the state government's documents. They even said that people can't even say climate change in a work-related, like government work-related forum. Public meetings, they can't say climate change. You're talking to a coworker that's part of the state government, you cannot say climate change. You cannot mention, you can't do studies on climate change. You can do studies on flooding, but you can't do studies on climate change. How are we supposed to get better when we have people in power who are doing these things? Removing phrases that is literally causing their state to flood on a regular basis. And they have to spend more money fixing these cities and these towns. And then the people who live there are devastated, potentially lose their livelihoods, potentially lose their homes, are in debt because they can't afford to buy another home because the insurance isn't going to give them any money. Like, where is all this money coming from? How are we paying for this? How are the taxpayers of the U.S. paying for this? This is what happens when you have politicians in place who are not doing anything about what is real, what is actually happening, how the changes are happening. They see it, they don't believe it, and they go against what everybody's saying. Just because they say people are overreacting. These scientists aren't real. It's not actually agreed upon by 97% of scientists, which is BS. Such BS. And it's costing people lives and their homes and their livelihoods. In capitalism at its finest, you see people trying to fly out to get out because the driving is so difficult that flight tickets for flights out are getting higher and higher and higher as the storm approaches. So normally what would cost you $200 to fly out to a different state, the closest state that is not going to be affected, it's like $1,200, $800, $700, $1,200. There's people who are showing what the prices would be. They're gouging. That's what they're doing. They gouge because they can, because the demand is up. That's how capitalism works. It doesn't matter if this is an emergency and people are trying to get out, but people who can't afford a ticket for them or their families, they can't leave. And now they're at risk of, being harmed in a storm that could have been a Category 5, even a Category 3, which is still scary. And there still could have been a lot more damage than there was. It is devastating to watch people go through this. It's scary, but it's also frustrating to see the reactions and the lack of proper reaction and building of policies that will help the people of the U.S., the people of a specific country who is going through climate change consequences. But we have a chance as a people that are part of democratic societies to vote in people who will do something about climate change, who vote in people who are not going to believe in these crazy schemes or conspiracy theories, who want to criticize government policies to make them better to help the people later, not just to get into power. Not just to take down a government, but to say, let's work together on this and let's help the American people. I have more respect for somebody who's not in power as part of a party that says, let's work together to make relief efforts better after these disasters because we're going to see more of them. I'd rather vote for somebody like that, even if I don't believe in their party structure, because they're willing to work with the government to make it better, than somebody to come up with some crazy conspiracy theory and pass it out and make sure that misinformation is out there to like say, hey, you know what? Like, who cares? I want to be in power. You suck. You're doing this. You're cloud seeding. You're making the Republicans not vote because of this storm. You're controlling the weather. You're controlling the weather. This is like a scene out of like a Mike Myers movie. It's like Dr. Evil. Like, give me a break, people. Like, let's get back down to reality. Let's vote for people who want to work with government, whether they're in power or not, for the people that they're representing, right? For their country, for the betterment of the country, not for the power in getting in. And this is not just the U.S. This is Canada. This is the U.K., Australia, India, China, everybody. Let's vote for people who care more. If you can vote in a country, I know some of those countries you can't vote for the people. Vote for somebody who will do something. Right? That's the call to action. Vote for somebody that will actually work with the government, whether in power or not, to help the people. That's the goal. That's what politicians should be doing. And what I'm seeing right now is disgraceful in some of these politicians pulling out of thin air these conspiracy theories to try and bring down a government. Unreal. And it's literally a disgrace. It's sad. It's not even laughable. It's just sad. But that's the call to action. Let's go out. Let's do our research. Let's vote. And let's make our politicians accountable to helping their people. That's it for today's episode. I want to thank you for joining us. I apologize for doing the rant, but I feel like this is something that a lot of people are feeling. We see this all the time. I don't know if it's like a social media thing. I don't know if it's like a lack of education in schools. I'm not sure what's happening, but it's really distressful or stressful to watch. It really is. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know. You can comment on Spotify with this video. You can comment on YouTube, just comment on this video below. Or you can reach out to me on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. That's at How to Protect the Ocean. Let me know how you feel about this when you see politicians saying these ridiculous things. I'd love to hear your thoughts and how you're going to vote in the future when you look at it and how you're holding your politicians accountable. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.